I'm really excited to be speaking with you today. I do work on big bet is high risk, high reward, usually with huge multidisciplinary teams for proposals, and often I work on teams that include outside stakeholders, so industry, education partners, all kinds of stuff. And my passion sort of is working with these teams to avoid Frankenstein's monster. So Frankenstein's monster, in my view, is kind of when a team comes together with a proposal, slaps it on the table, on the lab table, and says, okay, good to go. So that's what we're going to talk about avoiding today. And we had sent out an email saying that y'all could prepare paragraphs to work on today to use for some of the examples I'll have. If you don't have those, no worries. You can just do some brainstorm writing during the exercises. Just jot down some notes, whatever you think, and we'll try to make these slides available later so you can utilize those exercises on your own work. I guess people ask questions, right? Oh, yeah. We're trying to figure something out. Hold on, everyone. Why is the screen share paused?
I think.
Resume share.
Yeah. Can you guys see? Okay, Karen can see the slides.
Okay. Will you guys let us know, do you see a slide that says the pitfalls of Frankenstein's monster?
We see the view like you're working in PowerPoint, so we can see the slides 1 through 6, for example, on the left, and then right now it's the title page is the big one.
Got it.
That's what I.
That's so strange. Yeah. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay,
great.
Now it looks like big, like slideshow view, and it's the pitfalls.
Fabulous. Okay, sorry everybody.
No problem.
Tiffany, cricket. Okay. So this is some of the stuff I hear from teams when they're talking about coming together to write a proposal. So you get together really briefly for some coffee and dessert, and you say, you know what, everybody write their part. Let's meet back here in 4 months, and we'll just kind of slop it all together. So divide and conquer, basically. There's a possibility even of people thinking that they can send it in that way with no editing. Everybody just kind of crams their parts together and they say, you know what, it's due tomorrow, let's go. I'd encourage you not to do that. There's also the idea of, you know what, there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. We're gonna let somebody, usually the PI, just basically write the whole thing, or everybody can send in parts and the PI will be the only person who ever gets to look at all the stuff. So nobody really has ownership over the whole proposal. Another thing is, what does that mean? So I hear a lot of times people, there's an issue with shared vocabulary, shared understanding. We have no idea what's being proposed. Sometimes we aren't even comfortable asking that. And then probably the most common I hear is the foundation's already laid out. This is just frosting the cake. So aside from being a terrible mixed metaphor, that is, the project is already developed, you know, we already have the work. This proposal is really just a box to check. It's not that big of a deal, it's a no-brainer. So these are pitfalls and fallacies, as anybody who writes a proposal knows, because the proposal is kind of an entity unto itself apart from the project. It's doing something completely different. The project is the work you're trying to pursue. The proposal is convincing the agency that you deserve funding to pursue it. Totally different beasts. Now it won't let me click forward. Okay. So this presentation is going to be separated into a few different steps. Step 1 is pre-writing. So proposal writing meeting is where I suggest getting all this done. Yes, an in real life meeting with your whole team in a room. Not always everything's favorite thing to hear, but I promise it'll pay off. So the first thing you can do in this meeting is talk about sharing a vision. And this is probably my favorite model ever with the penguins. So you've got your source penguin on the left, and he's trying to get his message of fish across to that penguin on the right in the green scrubs. However, there's this wall of blocks between them, and they're all the receiver's blocks. So the receiver's assumptions of the idea, the receiver's fatigue. The reviewer has read 18 proposals already today, and yours is the last one in the pile. The reviewer's distractions. What else is he thinking about? Is he thinking about the dinner he wants to go get? So for the message to reach this receiver, you have to get over all these blocks. And this, not only for the reviewer, is something you're going to have to do within your team. You have to make sure everybody is on the same page about the message, and you're going to do that by working together and getting feedback. So it's this continuous loop, right? Message to feedback. You need to get the feedback to make sure that everybody is actually understanding. So my advice for this is, at this team meeting, you need to give space to allow everyone to explain their vision of the project. I'll talk about a way to do that in a moment. And as people are discussing, listen for the pressure points. What keeps coming up again and again that is not understood? And once you kind of understand these pressure points, you can start mapping a model of your vision as a group. And I think this visualization is pretty much essential to writing a proposal as a team. So if you have that paragraph you worked on, you can think about now, if a person on your team read your paragraph, say a budget manager, the PI, key personnel from a different school, could they construct a visual of what your paragraph is talking about? What about a well-educated person who is in a totally different field? What about a high schooler? So remember, the reviewer is not technically, well, not always going to be in your field. You need to think about different audiences and how they can visually be represented. So here's a really nice mental model, a little simpler. You can notice there's a timeline here attached to the model. Questions that might be asked by somebody are up top, and then answers are on the bottom. This is fairly simple. Here's this one. Obviously much more intense, right? So this would be a team sitting together. We're figuring out our pressure points, and then we're figuring out connections. So I just included these to show that your model could be simple timeline style. Your model could be this intense relationship kind of model. It's really what's going to work best for your team and the project. Something I'm going to come back to again and again is specificity for your project today. The next thing I would suggest doing is developing a project dictionary. So you have everybody list words that are going to be commonly referenced in this project. And once that list is up on a board, you define those words in the terms of the project. And I think you're going to be very surprised by what words you might think everybody understands, but there is really no shared sense of understanding. Something that comes up again and again for me in my work is the difference between objectives, aims, and goals. Every discipline has a different definition of this, and they stick to it with everything they've got. And so it's my job then to learn the vocabulary, learn the dictionary that they're using, right? And I use that in my conversations with them. So fluidity and changeability. So after you decide on this dictionary, it's important that you use those words as defined both in your discussions in the team, right? You've made a pledge, this is the meaning of the word and how we're going to use it, and you use it in the proposal. This will show consistency and coherency across the whole lifespan of the project, not just in this one meeting, this one room, this one time. Here are some common at-risk words. Risk, goal, person months, that's a personal favorite because anybody working outside of academia will have no idea what you're talking about when you talk about notions of time and effort. So if you have that paragraph with you right now, you can look it over and say, do you see any words here that are a little questionable? Think with an outsider's mind. Is this kind of weird? You could highlight them now if you do. Another thing I'd like to say before we move on about that dictionary is you really can put together a Word document with the dictionary and have it easily accessible for everybody in the group. There's always going to be people who don't want to ask the question, so they can just delicately go into that dictionary on their own, right, and take a peek. And having a physical document can be incredibly helpful. So the last step of pre-writing that I'd like to talk about is developing a timeline and a pledge. So you need to be guided by the agency's deadlines. That's just how it goes in the world of proposals. They can't miss it. And then there's a project timeline with deadlines that the whole team decides on, right? The you'd betters. And then everybody works differently. There's different work styles, but I like to encourage my team members to map out their own timelines that get my butt in gears. This is something that is aligned with the other deadlines, but takes, kind of has them look at their work style, their own way of writing, and they map their own way to get things done. So crucial, as much as possible, the you'd betters should be decided when everybody's in the room. These project timelines, I promise it's so much easier to decide that day than over email as the months go on. The second crucial step is everybody signs the pledge. Not an in real life pledge, but there's an expectation that this will happen. Obviously, stuff comes up, people have issues, holidays happen, right? But there should be an understanding of mutual responsibility in the room that this is what we've agreed on and we'll do our best. And having people in the room together actually creates this culture of responsibility, right? When you see somebody, when you make a promise to somebody's face, you feel a little more devoted to that promise than you would in a quick email. Writing the proposal, it's alive. Here's some tips for actually doing the writing. You'll notice that I focus a little more on pre-writing and post-writing, because writing the proposal is really it's a project by project kind of thing. I can't give you a ton of advice because it requires so much specificity, but there's a few things that kind of run through all. My first suggestion is tackle stuff in bite-sized pieces, especially when you're approaching your team about it. So imagine going to a key personnel member and saying, okay, I need you to write this 12-page project description by next Tuesday, and I'll copy edit, and we'll just kind of chuck it in. Versus, okay, within the project description, Dave is going to write about this specific aim that mostly pertains to him. Tina will do this specific aim and Greg this one. And then we'll meet on Thursday to discuss how these fit together. We'll finalize, we'll craft and edit using all those tools we've talked about in the pre-writing phase, the dictionary, the timeline. And then we'll work to fit it in the full proposal. So asking people to do bite-sized pieces of this massive work is going to, first of all, be a whole lot less stressful. And second of all, provide them time and breathing room and a little bit of a lessened sense of responsibility, because they know we're going to talk about this. This is not the end all be all. We're going to discuss, I'm going to get feedback. I have a master's in fiction writing, and the number one thing that I took away from that program was the importance of getting feedback from my peers. There's just something about getting an outsider's perspective on your work that changes anything you'd ever seen before. So working in a vacuum is really ineffective when you're doing multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary proposals. So if you have your paragraph, you can look at how you've written it and then pick somebody else on your team. So a PI, a postdoc in the lab, a staff assistant, and try to rewrite these sentences from their perspective. See, did it change? What do they care about more? Is there something that you didn't think about? We're not going to spend a lot of time working on the exercises today because I understand everybody's got valuable time and I want to get through this, but these are some really interesting things you could come back to later, maybe even work on with your whole team. So this is a great time, going with that feedback idea, to have people write stuff together, or everybody can write the same section. So having multiple people write a project summary, and then you come in, you can kind of cherry pick, oh, I love what this person did, but I like this ending sentence better. I'm stealing Christine Hendren's term here of somebody needs to be the arrow with this project. So this is the person who sort of has the idea of steering, right? obviously we're throwing a lot of creativity out here, but somebody needs to lead the project to the final phase, where we're headed. Keep an idea of where we're headed. So I'm not encouraging you to just have creativity out in the middle of nowhere and it can turn into chaos. I'm saying creativity with impact, creativity looking for output, creativity looking for outcome. Okay. So this feeds into this idea of converge, diverge, transform. So even if everybody's working on stuff by themselves, you want to build in time to have converging, diverging, and transforming. You've got that first stage when you're writing by yourself is like, what the hell am I doing? That second stage when you come back together is, what the hell are we doing as a group, right? And then finally, there's that moment of, oh my God, we're actually doing it. We're actually getting a proposal out of this. So the importance of building in time is that last step, right? You've built time for yourself, time for the team, and then time to really craft what you've written into this final proposal. So think about a project you're working on now or a problem project in the past. Is there anything that you've written that will be referenced in other people's sections? Or is there info you need from other people to write your section? I'm guessing you're going to answer yes. How do you get that information? Do you email it, Dropbox, Google Doc? This idea of everything has to come together to blend into the final project, and building time for it is something we often forget. So I encourage you to think about it now so you can include it later. There we go. Now we're clicking. If you're stuck, come back to the audience, right? The audience for NIH is going to be very different than the audience for NSF in terms of reviewers. Who's the intended audience? What is their vision, mission? How will this project help fulfill it? And why should they care? If you have somebody on your team who's freaking out about what they should do, lead back to this. They can do a free ride on it even. But this is the best advice I have for if you're totally stuck. Think about audience. So here's a challenge for you. Without looking at that paragraph that you wrote, write the who, what, how, and why for your project you're working on now. See if they compare, see what's different, and then think about one thing you could do right now to make it align even more with your intended audience. Post writing, hallelujah. First draft's the hardest part. We've got it done. So now we all come back to the table and we kind of have a monster. But I don't say it's a monster anymore. It's a collage because we've all worked from the same starting point. We have our team vocabulary. We have our shared deadlines and a pledge that won't meet them. We have this collage coming together. It's still a mess, but we're headed somewhere, right? But now what? So something that's useful to do if you have the time, the opportunity announcement will lay out a general framework for where things should go in this proposal. But for a thing like a project description where it's 12 pages, there's lots of ways you can organize that. So something I like to do is called Post-it style. Imagine if you had everything on Post-its, you can start moving things around, right? So you have this beautiful sentence about whatever, aim one. You don't know where to put it. Start putting it here. Move your Post-it up a few pages. Does that work? Not so much. Okay. Well, it's on a Post-it. So now you can move it down a few more pages. Does it work there? You can do this in a Word document. I find it really helpful. I'm a visual learner to actually print and cut things out and move them around in space, like a literal collage. This is something you could do with a few team members on one section. Probably a little overwhelming with the whole team, but it's a really great way to start understanding, first of all, that everything's editable. Second of all, that a structure will kind of emerge from what you've written. Now, this goes to my third point here. Don't get married. Not talking about the legal institution, talking about all ideas are changeable, and the hardest thing to embrace is change. You might have crafted something so perfect that you're so proud of, but if it really doesn't mesh with the overall vision of the proposal, you're going to have to love it and let it go, let it fly out of the nest. So this is a point in the process where everybody really has to be open-minded to innovation and to the proposal as a whole, not just their little part they've written. Hopefully, if you followed the steps here, there's kind of a culture of open-mindedness and a culture of understanding transdisciplinarity, where this will be easier than if you ask people to come in having only discussed by email and then put their stuff on the chopping block. Always, no matter what I'm saying here, look back at the opportunity call from whatever agency you're looking at, look at it again. There's going to be specific guidelines that should come first. So final countdown, final approval. Creativity has reigned, but now it's time for somebody to finalize. So I encourage you to pick somebody who has final power of veto. This person is going to be the last person with hand on the proposal besides, you know, your ORS office. This person is going to make the ultimate decision. So if a discussion has been going on for forever and we're still undecided what the choice is, this person will make the choice. At this point, you've kind of ruled by committee for a lot with an arrow leading how things should go, where things should steer. This is the time where you're really going to have to buckle down and make final decisions. However, the final reviewer needs to assure that they're working from the groundwork that's already been laid. So they're using that dictionary that everybody has settled upon. They're taking the temperature of the room during these structuring discussions and going, okay, yep, they understand the vision everybody's agreed upon, and that's what they're maintaining. Otherwise, what has this whole period of scaffolding and setup been for? So you need to have somebody in charge here who is really open to what the group has done, and their job is to say yes. And I don't know if any of you have done improv acting, but one of the rules in improv is that you can never say no to a suggestion. You can only say yes and. So you say yes and then add on. Improv would be pretty terrible if somebody said, your bed's on fire, and you said, no, it's not. Okay, I have water for you. No, you don't, right? Your job as the final vetoer is to say yes, and I'm going to build upon what you've written here and just make it even more coherent to the vision that we've all decided upon. So here's some homework to think about. If several people on your team have participated in this seminar, you can look at the first draft of the paragraph that you brought and then look at what's been done to it after you've worked on these exercises. And then point out similarities and differences between everybody's work. What came through? What are the main points that really shone through to everybody? So how then do you take those and put them into a whole? The thing to think about, if it's only you're trying to think about how to take these principles out to your team, is think about the changes you made in your own paragraph and what sticks out to you as the most essential change if you had to pick one. Then think of an actionable way that you will report this change to your team. Often the hardest part of this, right, is taking your creative thoughts and figuring out how to vocalize that to a group. If it's a transdisciplinary group, it's even harder because you have people from all kinds of backgrounds, right? So maybe think of a few ways you could report this change to your team. A graphic example, a visual design, written word, communication, all that's great. And then how does that change? What repercussions could that have for the entire proposal? So if you were just working on that first paragraph and you changed, you sort of specified the societal impact that you've seen. Well, what changes will that affect in the specific aims? What changes will that need to affect in perhaps the team members you'll need to bring in or the equipment you'll use? We've created this vision, right, of the proposal as a whole, an organism in and of itself, greater than the sum of its parts. So because of that, any change you make in one area is going to kind of reflect over everything. So where else can you see it changing? Okay. any questions, everybody? I know that was kind of a crash course. I'm always available by email, but if there's any questions you can think of right now about putting this stuff into practice, about, I don't know, some experiences I've had or examples, feel free to ask.
Okay.
You want to pull up like my video?
Yeah.
This is Christine. Lauren, that was great. Thanks so much for that presentation. I guess my question that comes to mind is just, you already gave some really great examples of the types of ways people can get in their own way as a team. And I wonder if you have a sense of, you know, part of navigating the whole being the arrow thing is often leading from underneath, right? So you're coming into a room where whoever is putting together the proposal is and is going to be the authority figure over the conversation. And I wonder if you could just speak to experiences and any pointers about how to navigate when they may unknowingly often be the source of the roadblocks to this type of communication, like the ice blocks between the penguins. So are there examples you can think of, you know, names redacted or whatever, but and clues for people when they might be finding their way into a situation where they're helping and maybe they're not even really officially the arrow, but they're just helping make things better? I think you get my question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally get it. And this is a great question, right? Because at the end of the day, quite often the PI is going to have end all be all say. So what can you do as whatever role you may serve if you see those blocks coming up to kind of diplomatically step in? So I had a team once where the PI had a very difficult time kind of getting off his pontificating horse. So he tended, if we had an hour, he would spend 50 minutes of it just talking. And I was actually sort of a member of the team, more just looking in on the meetings. But I came forward at some point when a question was asked, how can we make these meetings more productive? It feels that we're not getting as much done as we might. I said, well, something I've noticed is that I think communication could be emphasized in this team. What if we had round table style meetings where I can keep a timer? I will time everybody for whatever it was, 10 minutes. Before they come, they will take a specific thing they want to talk about. They'll write it down, and each person will get to talk. After that 10 minutes talking period, we'll have 5 minutes of discussion, and then we'll move on. So what this is highlighting is, if you're serving as the arrow, you're going to have to be kind of a therapist in the room, right? You're going to have to understand personality of the team and the people on it and decide what will be best. So the other side of my example would be a team where everybody is so excited to talk and they just talk for an hour and the ideas are everywhere. It's great. But we walk away from the meeting and all we have is ideas. Okay. So maybe you in that meeting, seeing this is happening, can say, hey guys, let's pause. I'm going to write down the 3 main things at the end of this meeting. Let's take 15 minutes. I'll write down the 3 main things I've heard. I'm going to put those on the board. I'm going to send them out in an email. When we come back next week, let's start there and build from that. So it's understanding the personalities of the team and what will be needed most going forward to get a proposal out the door, and then taking delicate steps. Something I will say, because it can be scary to like interject yourself like that, is starting very early with this culture of, hey, everybody in this room is just trying to make the best proposal we can make. Everybody here has a voice. Everybody has a seat at the table. That will provide you the space to step forward and make these interjections and suggestions. I'm not a very step forward, take the lead sort of person, but it's much easier for me in a room where the culture is one of everybody has the right to say something. Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. Yes, and answered the question.
Yeah, that was great. That's nice and specific. And I guess the other thing that I feel like that leads to is that if there is a person who actually just doesn't believe that everyone should have a voice, they're probably going to self-select away from utilizing your type of skills anyway. And so it's sort of just like in a business, you figure out there are certain clients you don't want. Maybe that's just kind of letting that go is one way not to bang our heads against the wall. And then hopefully word of this very useful culture gets around. Is that kind of your tack for people that just reject the premise?
Yeah, so this presentation obviously kind of embraces a kumbaya culture of, ideal situation of working. There are always going to be those, I'm preaching to the choir right now because everybody in this group has kind of embraced team science. But yeah, something I might try is coming forward to them, having a private meeting with them on their level, and presenting them with whatever I think will be an effective communication of the value of what I'm trying to put forward. So if it's scholarly articles, if it's personal experience, whatever you think will work. So I do try to have at least like one kind of intervention. After that, yeah, I think you realize, okay, this person is probably not my cheerleader. What other things can I work on with this team that will help? What bits and pieces of the toolkit I just talked about, what bits and pieces of that can I integrate into our work? But yeah, sometimes you're just going to have that person, and I am one to beat my head against a wall, but I've learned to just see if that's the rock in the river, you have to be the river that flows around it. There's no point in getting stuck behind it. Any other questions, guys? Okay. Shall we open up to talking about Christine Hendren's questions?
Yeah, does anyone else have any questions about what might come of our, or how we want to move forward with incorporating into insights? And Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, if that is how we want to phrase that. If you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share about what you'd like to continue to get out of this community and how we want to move forward with insights, we're happy to open up that discussion.
Well, if people don't have comments right now, I will be finding out more from the insights side, what it means to be a special interest group. So far, I will just share with you all that they have been really enthusiastic, that we are, such a well-established community with a lot of opportunity to keep coming back and serving our shared interests. So I think that they're going to be very open to what it looks like for us. So if you're thinking of things that you would like to get out of this, one thing that comes to mind is exploring whether they could help us with website maintenance and be a little bit more formally affiliated in that way, or that type of thing. I would, for my part, I would want to make sure that we retain our autonomy in terms of being able to serve whatever it is that folks that call into these webinars want, because our whole purpose is to create a useful conversation that's adding to all of us. So, so anyway, again, feel free to open up and share those over the listserv.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right.
I also wonder if folks don't have comments on the special interest group right now, I wonder if other people have examples that they would feel like sharing of, times when looking back, they realized that a proposal was sort of a Frankenstein's monster, and could have benefited from one of these exercises like the dictionary talk. And also, not to throw everybody onto the spot with this question, but if there's any skepticism toward ideas that maybe some of these would be great ideas, but people are having a hard time figuring out how it would actually be swallowed when offered up to a real team. I always think that bringing up skepticism is a great way to advance the conversation and problem solve. So just throwing that idea out there as well.
Absolutely.
I will say you can raise your hand in the Zoom app by clicking a button, or you can just come off mute and throw your voice out there.
So can I give a example-y kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Talked. Okay. So I had a researcher. I proposed to do some work on broader impacts for an NSF proposal, some looking into how we could work beyond kind of the usual suspects of their planned outreach into basically their diversity initiative was, they said, well, we always reached out to the same college and we'll just throw that and tack it on at the end of the proposal. And I said, what if we had the team get together and really thought about what specifically to this project would be a more impactful way to write broader impacts, because I understand that's how it's been done in the past on all your proposals, but I don't think that's the most effective thing here. And he said, we don't have time and we're not interested. And I want you to write that today and get it to me tonight. And so I kind of, and I did write it, but the other thing I wrote as he thought it should be written. But the other thing I did was really went back to the agency website, to the NSF website, what they say about broader impacts. I went through the solicitation and looked at what it said about broader impacts, and I mapped out for him the discrepancies I noticed between how he had always done it and what was really being asked for, whether legitimately asked for in that solicitation, or what the whole NSF kind of mission and vision asks for as a whole. And so I was able to go back to him with what he would consider concrete evidence of my understanding of the discrepancies. And after that, he did say, you know, let's not have a whole team meeting, but me and two other team personnel and you can meet tomorrow and discuss what would be feasible. And then we did have a really good kind of a brainstorming session. He was obviously very concerned with outcomes, right? So I, as the arrow of the meeting, steered towards outcomes and not just random brainstorming about, oh, this would be cool. But kind of understanding where your PI is coming from and providing what they will take as concrete information. So in this case, the concrete information was the funding agency isn't going to give you the money for that. You'll have to kind of see how to best be persuasive. Yeah.
That's such a great point that you bring up right there. And it just reminds me, Lauren and I have been having conversations as part of a little reading group that we have started just on managing up. And I'm just realizing how many of all of the examples you've given have been really great examples of how to just manage up in terms of figuring out what the person that you're trying to convince needs in order to be convinced. And it's just a little bit extra work on your part, but it can go a long way. So,
yeah. Anybody else examples?
Okay. Matt.
Hi. Hey, so I was actually really struck by the one thing that you said, and it's kind of related to just kind of this process of actually building the proposal is actually also the process of building the team, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I don't really have a question necessarily, but just thinking about how we can sell the proposal process almost as like this is going to set you off on the right track. This is going to put you in a place where you're going to be most effective as a team. You talked about it related to vocabulary and other things like that. So just maybe in the last few minutes, maybe you have a good example of a success story that like carried through to not only just the successful proposal, but hey, this team learned how to work together during the proposal process.
Yeah, yes, I was like, oh, am I going to be able to think of an example? But I actually have a really cool one. I was at Colorado State before Duke, and they have a program called Catalyst, where they do some seed money for teams that sort of have an idea of a proposal they want to go for, and really invest in the project management and formation of the team as they're trying to write that proposal. So it gives them some space and time to have brainstorming sessions, to have whatever retreats, that sort of thing. And so there was a team that was working on some translational technology, so nanotechnology that was kind of in the industry pipeline, basically. And when they first came together, the PI was an early career investigator who didn't really know how to proposal. And the team was made up of quite a few international professors who, had to get used to a culture of teaming in the US. And the US members of the team had to get used to their preconceived notions of what a team was. So it was kind of this amazing literal catalyst for seeing if the program could work or not. It had so many variables. But this team really embraced from the get-go, I think because everybody was so off of their footing from the very start, the thing they chose to hold on to was, yep, we're going to take this idea of team culture and building our own team culture and run with it. And so they really invested 100% in these like kumbaya sort of activities and this idea of sharing vision, sharing a dictionary. And they wrote a proposal. They got the funding for that, for a smaller NSF proposal. And then by building this team, they were able to have such a the outcome of it was so good that they started to bring in other team members from other areas of the school who'd heard about the amazing work this team was doing. And right now they're building into working on huge like center style transdisciplinary proposals. So they were sort of like a little engine that could at first for us. And the only thing that these researchers really had in common was enthusiasm for working as a team. And now they're kind of a powerhouse of the university. So that's like perfect example. That's the example you want.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Do we have any other questions that people want to ask before we wrap up here? Okay. Well, if not, thank you for everyone for joining us today. And we are going to have this recording up on the website. The October webinar is being processed right now and will be up on the website shortly. And we also have some great webinars coming up in the spring semester of 2019. So stay tuned for those. And thank you for participating.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.